She got punishment of being Undress. His warm eyes changed her fate. The twin moons of Celestia bathed the sacred grove in silver-blue light, illuminating the slender figure bound to the ancient tree. Lyra trembled, her teal skin glistening, with dew as the night air caressed her exposed form. The elders had left her with only the ceremonial bindings covering her chest and hips, the traditional garb for those condemned to ascension. "The sky beings will judge your heresy, elder," Nixon had declared, his cold eyes reflecting nothing of the compassion he preached. "For questioning the ancient ways, you shall be offered to them." Lyra knew the truth. No one returned from ascension. The thick jungle surrounding the grove teemed with predators drawn to the bioluminescent flora and to helpless prey. Her offense: teaching young Celestians to read the forbidden star maps, warranted death in the eyes of those who feared change. She flexed against her restraints, the iridescent fibers cutting into her wrists. Her midnight blue hair, styled in intricate braids interwoven with tiny crystals, fell across her face as she slumped in defeat. The ceremonial markings painted across her shoulders and back, meant to make her a worthy offering, felt like a mockery. A rustling in the undergrowth froze her blood. Already, something approached. Lyra straightened, determined to face death with dignity. If the predators of Celestia would claim her, she would not give the hidden watchers the satisfaction of her fear. But instead of gleaming fangs or razor claws, a figure emerged that made her amber eyes widen. A man, but unlike any Celestian. His skin lacked the blue-green hue of her people, instead bearing a warm tan. His eyes, a deep earthen brown, reflected the bioluminescent light as he scanned the grove, then fixed on her with surprise. "Stars above," he breathed, his voice carrying an accent she'd never heard. He stepped forward cautiously, hands raised to show he carried no weapons. "Are you all right?" Lyra stared, speechless. The legends spoke of beings from beyond the sky veil, but she'd never truly believed. Yet here stood proof. A sky being, an alien wearing a fitted exploration suit with strange insignia. "Can you understand me?" he asked, approaching slowly. "My translator should be working." "I understand," Lyra managed, her voice hoarse from hours of silence. "Are you here to judge me?" The man's brow furrowed. "Judge you? No. I'm Davin Riker, science officer from the Earth vessel Horizon." He studied her bonds, then the surrounding grove with its pulsing plants. "This looks ceremonial. Are you part of some ritual?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "The ritual of execution. I am Lyra, former Keeper of Stars, now offering to the sky beings." She lifted her chin, studying him. "Though you don't look like the demons our elders describe." Davin's warm eyes widened, then hardened with determination. "This is an execution?" Without waiting for confirmation, he pulled a small device from his belt and approached. "Hold still." The cutting tool hummed softly as it severed her bonds. As the restraints fell away, Lyra stumbled forward, her legs weak from standing for hours. Davin caught her, his touch sending an unexpected warmth through her chilled skin. "Thank you," she whispered, suddenly conscious of her ceremonial attire, or lack thereof. The traditional bindings covered little, designed to present her as a pure offering. Seeming to notice her discomfort, Davin shrugged out of his outer jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric carried his scent, unfamiliar, yet oddly, comforting like the rare spices traded in Celestian markets. "We need to move," he said, glancing toward the path. "I'm guessing whoever left you here might return to check." "At dawn," Lyra confirmed, pulling the jacket tighter. "The Watchers will come to confirm my ascension." Davin nodded grimly. "Then we have a few hours. My research camp is hidden in the Eastern Valley. Can you walk?" Lyra took a tentative step, then straightened her spine. "I can do more than walk, Skyman. I can lead you through paths the Watchers won't patrol." She met his gaze directly. "But why help me? I am nothing to you." His expression softened, those earth-brown eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "Where I come from, we don't leave people tied up to die, no matter who they are." He gestured toward the densest part of the jungle. "Lead the way, Keeper of Stars." As they slipped into the luminous darkness, Lyra felt something beyond the relief of rescue. a tremor of possibility, of futures unwritten in any star map she'd studied. Behind them, the sacred grove pulsed with light, empty of its intended sacrifice. The bioluminescent flora of the Celestian jungle cast eerie shadows as Lyra led Davin through narrow passages between towering fronds. Each plant they brushed released clouds of glowing spores that drifted around them like fairy lights, beautiful but potentially dangerous to the unprepared. "Don't breathe deeply when the azure ones release spores," Lyra warned, her voice barely above a whisper. She moved with practiced grace despite her ordeal, Davin's jacket hanging loosely over her ceremonial attire. "They cause visions, sometimes pleasant, sometimes terrifying." Davin nodded, carefully regulating his breathing. His eyes remained vigilant, alternating between watching their path and studying his unlikely companion. The translator in his ear conveyed her words perfectly, but there was something in her melodic accent that the technology couldn't quite capture. "How far to your camp?" Lyra asked, pausing at a fork in the natural path. "About 3 kilometers east," Davin replied. "But we should avoid the direct route. Your people—" "The Watchers have sensors throughout the outer groves," she confirmed, choosing the right-hand path. "This way adds distance but avoids their technology." They continued in silence for several minutes, the only sounds their careful footsteps and the ambient hum of nocturnal insects. Overhead, the twin moons, one silver, one with a faint purple hue, illuminated their path through gaps in the canopy. "Tayu called yourself the Keeper of Stars," Davin finally said. "What does that mean among your people?" Lyra's amber eyes reflected the bioluminescence around them as she glanced back. "I was a teacher of celestial navigation and keeper of the star maps, an honored position until I began teaching the forbidden knowledge." "Forbidden?" "The elders believe certain star patterns are sacred, not to be used for navigation but only for ritual. I discovered they actually mark the locations of other habitable worlds." Her voice grew passionate. "I taught my students that our ancestors likely came from these stars, that we weren't created from Celestia's soil as the traditions claim." Davin's eyes widened. "That's remarkably accurate. The preliminary data from our surveys suggests Celestians share genetic markers with several humanoid species from the Lyra constellation. You're almost certainly descended from space travelers." Lyra stopped abruptly, turning to face him fully. "You have proof? You've seen these other worlds?" "My people have charted thousands of inhabited planets," Davin said. "The genetic mapping suggests your ancestors arrived here roughly 12,000 years ago." A mixture of vindication and sorrow crossed Lyra's features. All those executed for speaking such heresy. And it was truth all along. Davin wanted to reach out to comfort her but hesitated, aware of the cultural divide between them. Instead, he said, "Truth often threatens those whose power depends on controlling knowledge." She studied him curiously. "You speak like a philosopher, not just a scientist." "On Earth, the two were often the same," he smiled. "Besides, you don't explore other worlds without developing some perspective on power structures." A distant call, something between a horn and a bird's cry, cut through their conversation. Lyra tensed immediately. "Warning signals," she whispered. "Urgently. They've discovered I'm missing sooner than expected." Without another word, she grabbed Davin's hand and pulled him off the path into a dense thicket of phosphorescent undergrowth. The plants closed behind them, concealing their passage but covering them both in glowing pollen. "We need shelter," Davin whispered. "Somewhere to wait until the search passes." Lyra nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. "There's a cave system near here, used for adolescent trials of courage. This time of year, it should be empty." They moved swiftly through the jungle, the distant signals growing more frequent. The bioluminescence that made the forest so beautiful also made concealment difficult. Their silhouettes would stand out to trained watcher eyes. The cave entrance appeared suddenly, a dark void in a wall of living rock covered with trailing luminous vines. Lyra pulled aside the curtain of vegetation and gestured Davin inside. The interior was surprisingly warm, with patches of glowing fungi providing soft light. "We should be safe here until morning," Lyra said, finally allowing herself to sink down against the smooth stone wall. The exertion had taken its toll after her hours of standing bound in the grove. Davin crouched beside her, pulling a small device from his pack. "Water?" he offered, extending a collapsible container. She accepted gratefully, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. As she drank, Davin studied the markings on her shoulders, intricate patterns that seemed both decorative and symbolic. "These markings," he said quietly, "part of the ceremony?" Lyra handed back the water. "They tell my life story, my achievements, my position, my crimes, so the sky beings would know who they were judging." A sad smile crossed her lips. "Ironic that a real sky being is the one who saved me." "I'm just a traveler," Davin said, settling beside her. "One who couldn't stand by and watch an injustice." "Why are you here on Celestia?" Lyra asked. "What do Earth people want with our world?" "Research, primarily. We study developing civilizations, their cultures, technologies, relationship with their environments. We try not to interfere." He gave her a wry smile. "Though I've clearly broken that protocol tonight." "I'm glad you did," Lyra said softly, unconsciously leaning closer to his warmth. Outside, the warning calls grew fainter as the search moved in another direction. In the relative safety of the cave, surrounded by the gentle glow of fungi, Davin found himself studying Lyra's profile. The elegant curve of her ear, the faint patterns visible beneath her skin when she moved, the way her midnight blue hair captured and reflected the ambient light. She turned, catching his gaze, and neither looked away. In the quiet of their hiding place, something unspoken passed between them. Curiosity, recognition, and the first tentative spark of connection. "Rest," Davin finally said, offering her the thermal blanket from his pack. "I'll keep watch." Lyra accepted the blanket but shook her head. "We'll take turns. You've saved my life. I won't risk yours with exhaustion." As the sounds of the forest settled into night rhythms and the search moved farther away, they sat side by side in the gentle glow, two beings from different worlds finding unexpected sanctuary together. Dawn broke over Celestia with a cascade of colors unknown to Earth, shades of lavender and teal bleeding into a copper sky as the twin moons faded. Inside the cave, Davin awoke to find Lyra already alert, sitting at the entrance with her knees drawn to her chest. "The search patterns have changed," she said without turning. "They're using spiral formations now, more thorough but predictable." Davin moved to join her, running a hand through his tousled brown hair. "You know their tactics well. I was once considered for the Watchers before I chose the path of knowledge," she explained. "The irony isn't lost on me." The morning light revealed details of her that the night had obscured, the faint scale-like texture of her teal skin along her temples and shoulders, the subtle glow that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Davin's jacket still hung from her. Shoulders, but in daylight, the contrast between his human clothing and her ceremonial bindings was stark. "We need to reach my camp," Davin said, checking his device. "I have supplies there, communications equipment and clothing that might help. You blend in if we encounter others." Lyra nodded, rising gracefully. "The Watchers will expect me to head toward the coastal settlements, where sympathizers might hide me. We should move inland instead." They exited the cave cautiously. The daytime forest was transformed. Plants that had glowed at night now displayed vibrant colors, unfurling broad leaves to capture the light of Celestia's white sun. The air was thick with sweet, spicy scents, and the calls of creatures Davin had catalogued but never seen. As they navigated the difficult terrain, Lyra revealed more about the beliefs that had condemned her. "The Council teaches that the twin moons are the eyes of the Creator watching for impurity," she explained as they climbed a steep ridge. "When someone questions the sacred texts or pursues forbidden knowledge, they're offering spiritual contamination to pure Celestia. And your crime was teaching that Celestians might be descendants of space travelers?" Davin asked, offering his hand to help her over a particularly challenging section. Her fingers intertwined with his naturally, her grip strong despite her ordeal. "That, and creating star maps that showed paths to other worlds, the elders called exceeding dissatisfaction with the perfection of Celestia." They crested the ridge and Davin paused, struck by the panoramic view. Forest stretched below them, interspersed with crystal-clear rivers and, in the far distance, the gleaming spires of what must be a Celestian settlement. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "I can understand why the elders want to protect it." "Protection. Through ignorance isn't protection at all," Lyra replied, her amber eyes scanning the horizon. "Beauty without understanding is merely decoration." The philosophical depth of her statement reminded Davin why she had been a teacher and why the elders might have feared her influence. They continued their journey through the day, moving from the cover of the forest into a region of floating rock formations. Chunks of earth suspended mysteriously above the ground, creating natural bridges and shelters. Lyra explained they were formed by the interaction of Celestia's magnetic core with mineral deposits, a phenomenon that had inspired many religious interpretations. "My research camp is just beyond that cluster," Davin said, pointing to a particularly dense grouping of suspended boulders. "We've been using the magnetic interference to mask our presence." As they approached the final stretch, Lyra suddenly froze, her head tilting as though listening to something Davin couldn't hear. "What is it?" he whispered. "Tracker beasts," she breathed, genuine fear crossing her face for the first time. "They've released the Vicora." Before Davin could ask for clarification, a high-pitched wail echoed through the floating rocks. Something large was moving toward them, leaping from one suspended platform to another with frightening agility. "Run!" Lyra grabbed his hand, pulling him toward a narrow gap between two hovering boulders. They tracked by body heat and scent. They sprinted across natural stone bridges, the creature's cries growing closer. Davin caught glimpses of a sleek, six-limbed predator with iridescent scales following their trail with unnerving precision. "It's herding us," Lyra gasped, as they found themselves on a dead-end platform with a sheer drop below. "This is how they hunt?" Davin scanned their surroundings frantically, then spotted a lower platform about 4 meters down. "We need to jump," he said, pointing. "It's our only option." Lyra's eyes widened as she assessed the distance. "That's a dangerous leap." "Together," Davin said, taking her hand firmly in his. "I won't let go." The Vicora's wail sounded directly behind them as they backed up for momentum. Its massive form appeared at the entrance to their platform, fanged maw opening in anticipation. "Now!" Davin shouted. They ran and leapt as one, the ground falling away beneath them. For a heart-stopping moment, they hung suspended between safety and oblivion, the twin moons visible in the daylight sky seeming to watch their fate unfold. Their landing was hard but successful, both rolling to absorb the impact. The Vicora snarled, in frustration from above, unwilling to attempt the same jump. Breathing heavily, they found themselves pressed close together in the small space. Davin's arm had instinctively wrapped around Lyra during their landing, and now her face was inches from his, her midnight blue hair fallen loose from its braids, her amber eyes wide with the exhilaration of survival. "You didn't let go," she whispered. "I promised I wouldn't," he replied, suddenly aware of the warmth of her against him, the strange synchronicity of their heartbeats. Something changed between them in that moment, a barrier dissolving, a recognition deepening. Without conscious thought, Davin reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. Lyra's breath caught at his touch, her skin shimmering slightly where his fingers traced her cheek. "Your people," she asked softly, "do they form bonds with those not of their kind?" "Some of us believe connection transcends origin," Davin answered, his voice equally soft. "That understanding can bridge any difference." The moment suspended between them, as tangible as the rocks floating around them. Then, with the gentle inevitability of cosmic bodies drawn together, Lyra leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, then deepened with shared wonder. Davin felt a faint electrical tingle where their lips met, some biological aspect of Celestian physiology perhaps, or simply the chemistry of their connection. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Lyra's skin glowed more intensely, pulsing with the rhythm of her accelerated heartbeat. "The camp is just ahead," Davin said, reluctantly breaking the moment. "We should reach it before dark." As they continued their journey, something fundamental had shifted. They moved in greater synchrony, their hands finding each other naturally as they navigated the floating pathways, the Vicora's distant calls fading behind them. Above, the twin moons of Celestia watched silently, not as judging eyes of a creator, but as silent witnesses to something both ancient and entirely new. Davon's research camp was modest but well-equipped, a semi-permanent structure, nestled within a cluster of floating rock formations, its exterior camouflaged to blend with the surrounding mineral deposits. Inside, scientific equipment shared, space with living quarters, all designed for minimal environmental impact. "Your dwelling reflects your purpose," Lyra observed, as Davon showed her around. "To learn without disturbing." "That's the ideal, at least," he replied, activating the camp systems with a series of commands. Screens illuminated, displaying data streams and sensor readings that monitored the surrounding area. "Though I seem to have failed spectacularly at the not disturbing part by rescuing you." Lyra ran her fingers over the unfamiliar technology, her curiosity evident. "Sometimes disturbance is necessary for growth." She turned to him with sudden intensity. "Your arrival may be exactly what Celestia needs. Proof that the stars are not merely lights for worship, but worlds with their own peoples." Davon sighed, retrieving a medical kit. "My mission parameters strictly forbid cultural interference. My superiors would say I've already crossed that line by saving you." "And do you regret it?" Lyra asked quietly. "Not for a moment," he answered without hesitation, gesturing for her to sit. "Let me treat those marks from the restraints." As he gently applied a healing compound to her wrists, Lyra studied his face. The events of the past day had created a connection between them that transcended their different origins, something neither had anticipated, but both now acknowledged in small glances and lingering touches. "There's a problem," Davon said after checking his communications array. "The Celestian settlement activity has disrupted my ship's automated repair sequence. I need to manually restart it, but that means leaving the safety of the magnetic field. How long will repairs take?" "At least 2 days once restarted. The landing was rougher than planned." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "The Council will intensify their search. My escape challenges their authority. They cannot allow that to stand." She rose and moved to a storage unit, examining the earth clothing within. "I need to become someone else if we're to reach your ship." Selecting practical items that would cover her distinctive markings, Lyra disappeared briefly to change. When she returned, the transformation was remarkable. With her ceremonial attire replaced by Earth Expedition clothes, her ritual markings covered and her midnight blue hair tied back simply, she looked like a different person. "The color still marks me as Celestian," she said, gesturing to her teal skin. "But from a distance I could pass as a coastal trader. They often adopt foreign styles." Davon nodded appreciatively. "It's a good disguise. We'll move at dusk when the light is changing. Less chance of being spotted." As they prepared supplies for their journey, an alert sounded from the perimeter sensors. Davon quickly checked the display, his expression darkening. "Search party," he confirmed, bringing up the visual feed. 6 watchers with tracking equipment, heading this way." Lyra moved to his side, studying the feed. "Led by Elder Nixan himself," she said, her voice tightening. "He must truly fear what my escape represents." "We need to leave now," Davon decided, gathering essential supplies. "The magnetic interference will only hide us for another hour at most, before their scanners adjust." They slipped out of the camp through a rear exit, following a path that wound through the floating rock formations. The twin moons were rising again, casting double shadows that made the terrain even more treacherous. They had covered half the distance to where Davon's ship lay concealed in a dried riverbed when sounds of pursuit reached them. The Watchers had found the camp sooner than expected. "There's no outrunning them with their tracking technology," Lyra said, her mind racing. "We need to confront them." "Confront 6 armed Watchers?" Davon looked at her incredulously. "That's suicide." "Not combat," she clarified. "Confrontation of ideas. Elder Nixan's authority rests on his interpretation of sacred texts. If I can prove those interpretations are flawed—" She turned to Davon, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Show me your star maps, the real ones, showing Celestia's place among the stars." Understanding dawned on Davin's face. He activated his portable scanner, projecting a three-dimensional star chart into the air between them. "This is your solar system," he explained, expanding the view to show neighboring stars and then further to reveal the galactic arm containing Celestia. "Perfect," Lyra breathed, studying the projection with wonder and recognition. "This matches the forbidden patterns in our oldest temples, the ones the elders claim are merely decorative." The sounds of pursuit grew closer. Instead of continuing their flight, Lyra made a decisive turn, pulling Davin toward an elevated clearing visible to their pursuers. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Trust me," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Some traditions need to be shattered, to free the truth within." As the watchers emerged from the forest edge, Lyra stood tall in the clearing, her earth clothes marking her as changed, but her voice unmistakable as she called out in the formal Celestian ritual language. Davin stood beside her, scanner ready but hidden from view. Elder Nixan stepped forward, his ceremonial staff gleaming in the moonlight. His aged face registered shock at seeing Lyra alive, then hardened into righteous anger. "Blasphemer," he intoned. "You have defiled the sacred offering and consorted with an outsider. Your punishment will be—" "Knowledge," Lyra interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of her former position. "My only crime was seeking truth, Elder. The same truth written in our oldest temples, the truth you have hidden." Nixon's eyes narrowed. "You speak of heresy and call it truth." "I speak of origins," Lyra countered, "of the stars that brought our ancestors to Celestia 12,000 years ago." She nodded to Davin, who activated the star projection. The holographic map blossomed between them, stars and planets spinning in perfect representation of their sector of the galaxy. A collective gasp rose from the watchers as they recognized configurations matching their sacred symbols. "This outsider comes from one of these worlds," Lyra continued, her voice steady as she indicated Earth's position. "He has traveled the stars as our ancestors once did. The Creator's eyes are not watching to judge us. They are beacons guiding us back to our greater family among the stars." Elder Nixan's face contorted with rage and fear. "Manufactured illusions. This outsider uses forbidden technology to corrupt our sacred teachings." "Then explain this," Lyra challenged, stepping forward to pull aside her collar, revealing a pattern of birthmarks on her shoulder. "The star map I was born with, the same pattern your own texts call the Mark of the Travelers. It matches exactly the path from the Lyra constellation to Celestia." Davin adjusted the projection to highlight the route, the correlation undeniable. Murmurs rose among the younger watchers as certainty began to crumble. "Our traditions speak of ascension," Lyra pressed her advantage. "Not as punishment, but as return. We were meant to look upward with knowledge, not fear." As doubt spread visibly through the watchers' ranks, Elder Nixan raised his staff threateningly. "Enough! Seize them both!" But the younger watchers hesitated, looking between their elder and the compelling evidence before them. One stepped forward, a female not much older than Lyra. "Elder, what if she speaks truth? The ancient texts do mention travelers from distant shores of night." Nixon's authority visibly weakened as more watchers lowered their weapons, moving closer to examine the star charts with wonder rather than suspicion. In that moment of wavering control, Davin caught Lyra's eye and nodded toward the path leading to his ship. With the watchers distracted by internal conflict, they had their chance to escape. Slipping away as Nixan's increasingly desperate orders fell on reluctant ears, they ran through the moonlit landscape, the seeds of revolution planted behind them. The first hints of dawn illuminated the dried riverbed, where Davin's scout ship lay partially concealed by native vegetation. Its sleek form, damaged but still impressive, gleamed dully as they approached. "It's beautiful," Lyra said, her hand unconsciously seeking Davin's. "Like the shell of a sea creature from our southern oceans. Much less elegant inside, I'm afraid," Davin replied, leading her to the access hatch, especially after the rough landing. The ship's interior revealed a compact but functional space, navigation controls, research equipment and living quarters designed for long-term solo missions. Emergency lights cast a soft blue glow over everything as Davin activated the main systems. "The repairs will take approximately 48 hours, he explained, studying the diagnostic readouts. Propulsion and life support are priority. Lyra moved through the cabin, examining the technology with fascination. Her fingers traced unfamiliar symbols on the control panels, her mind clearly connecting them to patterns she had studied in secret. "Your ship confirms everything I taught," she said softly. "The designs echo our most ancient artifacts, the ones kept sealed in the forbidden archives." As Davin worked to restart the repair sequence, Lyra gazed through the main viewport at the Celestian landscape. The twin moons were setting now, yielding to the copper-tinted sunrise. Her homeworld had never looked more beautiful or more limited. "What happens when your repairs are complete?" she asked finally, the question that had lingered between them since their escape. Davin's hands paused over the controls. "Protocol dictates I return to my research vessel in orbit and report my findings, including the cultural interference I've caused. And then I'd be reassigned, most likely. Celestia would be marked for non-intervention for another century at least." He turned to face her. "Unless there's already been a significant cultural shift towards space awareness," understanding dawned in Lyra's eyes. "Like a religious revolution, questioning isolation and embracing stellar origins?" "Exactly." A smile tugged at Davin's lips. "The kind that might be sparked by a respected teacher revealing truth to the Watchers themselves." The ship's communication system suddenly activated, an urgent signal breaking through the static. Davin quickly adjusted the settings, revealing a transmission from a Celestian frequency, seeking the outsider and the heretic Lyra, a voice declared. "Elder Nixon has declared them enemies of Celestia. All settlements are to report sightings immediately." Another voice cut in. "This is Settlement Azuria refusing the order. The star maps confirm the teacher's words. We have examined our ancient records and found truth in her teachings." A third voice joined. "Coastal Haven stands with Azuria. The time of isolation is ending." More voices followed, a cascade of settlements declaring support for the new understanding, challenging the Elders' authority. The revolution Lyra had sparked was spreading faster than either of them had imagined possible. "It seems your people were ready for change," Davin said quietly as they listened to the transmissions. "They were always ready," Lyra replied. "They just needed permission to question." She turned to him, her amber eyes reflecting both sadness and hope. "But now I cannot return. The Council will never forgive my role in this, even if the settlements embrace the new understanding." The weight of her situation hung between them. A teacher without students, a knowledge keeper in exile from the very culture she sought to enlighten. "You could come with me," Davin said, the words emerging before he could analyze their implications. "My research vessel has Celestian specialists who would value your knowledge. You could help us understand your world better, perhaps. Even establish formal contact when your people are ready." "Leave Celestia?" The possibility seemed to both terrify and exhilarate her. "Follow the path of your ancestors," Davin suggested, moving closer to her. "See the stars they came from." Lyra's gaze returned to the viewport, to the world that had condemned her, and was now transforming because of her courage. Her skin shimmered with emotion, the bioluminescent qualities of Celestian physiology betraying her inner conflict. "I would be the first Celestian in millennia to travel beyond our atmosphere," she whispered. "A pioneer," Davin agreed, "but not alone." Their hands found each other again, fingers intertwining naturally despite their different biologies. The connection between them had grown from rescuer and rescue to something deeper, a recognition transcending their different origins. Outside, movement caught their attention. A group was approaching the ship, but not Watchers with weapons. These were younger Celestians, led by the female Watcher who had first questioned Elder Nixon. They carried not staffs of authority, but scrolls and ancient artifacts. "They seek knowledge," Lyra realized, watching them approach cautiously. Davin checked the ship's security systems. "They don't appear hostile. What do you want to do?" Lyra considered the question, her gaze moving from the approaching Celestians to the ship's controls that could take her to the stars, and finally to Davin himself. "I want to build a bridge," she decided, "between what was and what could be." For the next 2 days, as Davin's ship repaired itself, something extraordinary happened. The clearing around the vessel became an impromptu school. Lyra taught from the ancient texts the young Celestians had brought, while Davin shared star charts and basic principles of space travel. Knowledge flowed freely, the barriers of tradition giving way to exchange and understanding. Word spread, and more came, not to capture but to learn. Even as Elder Nixon and the Council denounced them as heretics, the movement grew. The seeds of a new Celestian age were taking root. On the final night before the ship would be ready to depart, Lyra and Davin stood alone on a floating rock formation, overlooking both the vessel and the small encampment of knowledge seekers that had formed around it. "They'll continue what you started," Davin said, his arm around her shoulders. "Your teachings won't be lost." "No," Lyra agreed, leaning into his embrace. "But they need to find their own path now, a Celestian path to the stars, not one imposed from outside." The twin moons illuminated them as they stood at this crossroads of worlds and possibilities. Lyra's midnight blue hair, free of its formal braids, danced in the gentle breeze. "Have you decided?" Davin asked softly. Lyra turned to face him fully, her hands rising to frame his face. In her amber eyes he saw the reflection of distant worlds neither of them had yet visited. "My place is no longer here," she said with quiet certainty. "Perhaps it never was. I want to see the stars my ancestors knew, to understand the greater universe." Her lips curved in a smile. "And I want to see it with you." Their kiss beneath, the twin moons sealed a promise that transcended planetary boundaries. Two beings from different worlds, united by curiosity, courage, and the most universal force of all, the gravity of hearts drawn inexorably together. At dawn, the ship rose. From Celestia's surface, witnessed by a gathering of young knowledge seekers who raised their hands not in farewell but in promise, a pledge to prepare for the day when their people would rejoin the stellar community. Inside the ascending vessel, Lyra watched her homeworld recede, its beauty overwhelming from this new perspective. The ceremonial markings on her shoulders, once symbols of her condemnation, caught the light of distant stars, transforming into a map of possibilities. "Are you afraid?" Davin asked, taking her hand as the ship broke through the upper atmosphere. "No," Lyra replied, her eyes fixed on the infinite expanse before them. "For the first time, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." As Celestia diminished to a gleaming point of light among countless others, its twin moons no longer seemed like watchful eyes but like companions on a cosmic journey. Ahead lay stars that had once been mere points of light in forbidden maps, now revealed as destinations, possibilities, homes. Beyond the azure stars of her native skies, Lyra had found not judgment, but belonging, not punishment, but purpose, and, in the warm eyes of an explorer from another world, the reflection of a future written not in ancient texts, but in the endless possibilities of discovery.